James was a software engineer from Seattle, tired of the endless noise and stress of city life. One Friday afternoon, he packed his gear and headed east toward the Cascade Mountains, planning a solo weekend camping trip to clear his head. His destination was a remote spot near Mount Rainier, far beyond any marked trails, where he hoped to find the peace the city had stolen. After hours of hiking through dense forest, James finally reached a small clearing beside a cold, rushing creek. The place was quiet, almost too quiet. Tall evergreens surrounded the area, their thick branches weaving together overhead, filtering the late afternoon light into scattered, dappled patterns. He set down his pack and began pitching his tent near the water's edge, savoring the fresh smell of pine and wet earth. As he moved around, gathering wood for a fire, James noticed odd things that made him pause. Broken branches, snapped at odd angles, littered the forest floor beyond his campsite. Nearby, deep, irregular footprints pressed into the soft soil, far larger than any deer or bear tracks he'd seen before. The prints seemed to appear from nowhere and ended just as suddenly, disappearing into the dense underbrush without a trail. The forest felt strangely still. No bird song, no rustle of small animals, only the faint gurgle of the creek and the soft hiss of wind through the needles. But as twilight settled, James caught something in the corner of his eye, a shadow slipping between the trees, quick and silent, vanishing before he could focus on it. He told himself it was a trick of the fading light, a tired mind playing games. Still, unease crept in. That quietness wasn't natural, and the feeling that he wasn't alone, that something was watching, waiting, pressed down on him like the weight of the dark forest itself. James brushed it off, reminding himself he was here to find peace. But the woods around him were holding their secrets close, and some of those secrets were about to come alive. As darkness fully settled, James settled by his small fire, the warmth offering a fragile sense of safety in the vast blackness of the forest. But soon, even that warmth seemed unsure. The flames flickered violently, dancing as if caught in a breath of wind that didn't exist. He glanced around, but the night air was still. No breeze stirred the heavy branches above. Then, faint whispers began to weave through the trees. At first, he thought it was the wind itself, sighing through the pines. But the sounds were too deliberate, almost like soft voices murmuring just beyond hearing. James strained to catch words, but there was only a low, indistinct hum, impossible to place. No matter how he turned or listened, there was no one in sight. No other camper, no animal, only the shadows. His fingers brushed his backpack to check his supplies. Everything should have been exactly where he left it, but he froze when he noticed his food pack, the zipper slightly undone, a small bag missing. His heart raced. He hadn't heard any footsteps or movement around the tent. How had anything gotten inside without a sound? Suddenly, far across the clearing, a pale light flickered through the trees. It wasn't the warm glow of a campfire or the steady beam of a flashlight. It hung in the air like a strange, hovering orb, shifting slowly from side to side. The light was too low to be a star, too high to come from the ground. James blinked, rubbed his eyes, but the light remained, silently watching from the darkness. Unease tightened its grip. Every time he looked toward the edge of the forest, shadows seemed to shift just beyond the reach of the firelight. Dark shapes moving between trunks, never fully revealing themselves. The feeling of eyes tracing his every move grew unbearable. The forest had stopped feeling empty. Something was out there, watching, waiting. By now, the weight of the night pressed heavily on James's chest. The strange light, the shifting shadows, the whispering voices, it all gnawed at his senses. The fire was dying. His hands trembled as he packed hurriedly. He decided then and there, he needed to leave. He couldn't stay another moment in that place that had slipped from quiet wilderness into something else entirely. He shouldered his pack and stepped toward the path he'd followed to the clearing. But as he moved forward, his breath caught in his throat. Where the trail had been, clear and open just hours ago, a tangle of fallen trees now blocked his way. Massive trunks, ripped from the earth as if thrown down by unseen hands, barred any chance of escape. His pulse quickened, every instinct screaming that something had changed the forest while he wasn't looking. A sudden chill rolled in with the fog, creeping low over the ground like cold breath slipping through the trees. The mist thickened quickly, swallowing the firelight and muffling every sound except the faintest, most unsettling noise, footsteps. Soft, deliberate, circling slowly around the tent. Not from far off, but close enough to make James freeze, eyes wide, heart hammering in the silence. Grabbing his flashlight, he swept the beam through the thick shadows beyond the clearing's edge. For a moment, The light caught the shape of a figure, tall, dark, almost blending into the trees, standing perfectly still. James's mouth went dry, but as he steadied the flashlight again, the figure vanished like smoke, leaving only emptiness behind. Then the sound came, low, slow breathing, inches from his ear. He spun around, flashlight stabbing into the blackness. Nothing. No one. Just the cold night air pressing against his skin, the fog swirling around his feet. The breath was gone, but the feeling remained, that something was right behind him, watching, waiting. And that, in the endless dark of the woods, he was no longer alone. James wandered through the thick forest for what felt like hours, his senses stretched thin, every shadow twisting into shapes he dared not face. The fallen trees and dense underbrush forced him off the path again and again, turning his escape into a desperate, disorienting maze. The cold fog clung to his skin, and the whispering voices seemed to fade only to return, now faint and distant, as if the forest itself was watching him stumble through its grasp. Eventually, the first pale light of dawn filtered weakly through the branches, breaking the endless night. James found a narrow opening and burst through the trees into a familiar trail. The same one he'd come in on, untouched and clear under the early morning sun. Relief flooded him, but beneath it lay something darker, a deep exhaustion that dulled his memory and shook his nerves to the core. He reached his car and drove back toward Seattle without looking back. When he finally reached home, he told himself it was over. Just a bad night, a trick of the mind twisted by fatigue and the wild. The forest was just that, forest. Quiet, natural, and safe. But the next day, when James unpacked his gear, something caught his eye. A single muddy footprint, large and deeply pressed, right inside his tent. The kind no animal native to those woods could have made. It wasn't there when he'd set up camp. How had it gotten inside? He stood frozen, the question burning in his mind. If someone, or something, followed you silently through the woods, would you even know? The woods keep their secrets well, and some things are better left unseen. In late October, a group of 4 friends from Portland set out on what they thought would be a simple weekend camping trip. Looking for a spot away from crowded parks and noisy campgrounds, they chose an old, little-known site deep in the Siskiyou National Forest, a place locals rarely mentioned and some even avoided. The spot was said to have been abandoned for decades, left to the trees and wild animals, but still marked on maps as a campground. The group dismissed the warnings as superstition, eager for solitude and adventure. As they arrived, the air was thick with a mix of damp earth and decaying leaves. The ground was littered with remnants of the past, rusted tools half buried in moss, crumbling fire pits ringed by stones blackened from long cold fires, and scattered belongings, faded and worn by time. Old cans, cracked lanterns, a torn tent flap caught on a nearby branch. All frozen remnants of lives once lived here, now forgotten. The friends joked about the eerie vibe, but beneath their laughter, an unspoken tension lingered. The forest around the campground was dense, the trees towering and close, their branches entwined overhead to form a tight canopy that filtered the fading daylight. The silence was deep, almost unnatural, no birdsong, no rustle of small creatures. Only the sound of their footsteps and the crackle of dry leaves beneath their boots broke the stillness. Locals told stories about this place, tales of campers who vanished without a trace, strange lights flickering between the trees, and voices calling out in the night. Some claimed the forest held a dark history, something that had never quite left. But the group shrugged it off, brushing aside the warnings as old folklore, the kind of stories told around campfires to thrill and scare. They were here for fun, for escape. What they didn't realize was that the forest was waiting, patient and watchful, ready to remind them that some places don't forget and some warnings are real. Night fell swiftly over the forgotten campground, wrapping the forest in an almost suffocating darkness. As the friends settled around their fire, the flickering flames struggled against a sudden chill in the air. At first, the sounds of the woods seemed normal, the occasional crack of a branch, the soft rustle of leaves. But soon, strange noises began to ripple through the stillness. A distant scream pierced the night, sharp, raw, and chilling, unlike anything human, but filled with terror. It echoed through the trees, fading into unsettling silence. Moments later, near the edge of the tree-line, the unmistakable snap of wood breaking sounded close by, sharp and deliberate, as if something large was moving through the forest just out of sight. The friends' nerves frayed further when shadows flickered near the tree line, shapes that vanished when they tried to focus on them. The shadows didn't behave like animals or passing hikers. They seemed deliberate, watching, slipping between the trees with unnatural silence. As the night deepened, one of the friends, Mark, vanished. The others woke to find his tent empty, the sleeping bag crumpled and torn. Panic surged when they discovered deep claw marks etched into nearby trees. Savage gouges that spoke of something far larger and more feral than any known animal. Torn scraps of fabric hung from jagged bark, proof Mark had fought to escape. Their fire, their last defense against the dark, began to fail them. Time and again, the flames sputtered out, not by wind or rain, but as if smothered by unseen hands. Every attempt to relight it ended the same. The fire snuffed out within moments, leaving them swallowed by darkness. In the weak dawn light, the group discovered carvings, strange, angular symbols etched deep into the trunks of trees surrounding the campground. These markings hadn't been visible the night before, hidden by shadows and fear. The symbols didn't resemble any language they knew. They seemed ancient, warning signs, or perhaps a mark of possession. The forest's hold on them tightened. Whatever had taken Mark was still close, still waiting, and the group was running out of time. The sun barely breaking through the thick canopy did little to ease the growing dread that gripped the remaining friends. They moved quickly, desperate to leave the place that had already taken Mark, their minds racing with every unsettling moment from the night before. They reached their vehicle, a dusty old truck parked just off the trail, and climbed inside, hope flickering that escape was finally within reach. But when the key turned in the ignition, the engine only coughed and sputtered, refusing to start. A cold wave of panic washed over them. The radio, their only link to the outside world, crackled once, and then cut off entirely, dead silence. No signal, no noise, as if the forest had swallowed all connections. Frustrated and terrified, they decided to head back on foot, thinking to reach the main road by dawn. But the forest seemed to have closed in tighter, the familiar paths twisting into a confusing labyrinth of shadows and shapes. Behind them, the faint but unmistakable sound of footsteps crunched steadily over dry leaves and broken twigs. Not the hurried pace of a fellow hiker or the random noise of wildlife. These steps were slow, deliberate, closing the distance with every breath. The friends' nerves shattered as they tried to peer through the darkness. In the weak glow of their flashlights, one of them caught sight of something impossible. A pale figure, ragged and motionless, standing just beyond the trees. Its eyes reflected the firelight, glowing faintly with a cold, empty light. The figure didn't move or blink, only watched with a stillness that sent a shiver deeper than the cold night air. The footsteps continued to come closer, circling them, patient and unrelenting. Every instinct screamed to run, but the forest swallowed every sound of their panic. The friends were trapped in a silent hunt, stalked by something they could neither see clearly nor escape. When dawn finally broke through the dense canopy, the forest seemed almost peaceful again, as if the night's terror had been nothing more than a cruel dream. The three remaining friends stumbled back toward the trailhead, shaken, breathless, and forever changed. Mark was gone, vanished without a trace, and the shadowy figure that had stalked them vanished with the night. They told their story to the local ranger the next day, expecting disbelief, but instead were met with silence and a quiet warning. The campground was once the site of a secretive gathering, decades ago, where a small group had vanished without explanation. Since then, many who dared camp there spoke of voices in the trees, cold spots, and eyes watching from the darkness. Few stayed overnight, and fewer returned unchanged. The friends left with a haunting certainty that the forest held on to those lost, that some part of it refused to let go. The strange symbols carved into the trees remained in their minds, cryptic reminders that some places carry a history far darker than what maps can show. Back home, none could shake the feeling of being followed, a shadow that lingered in their minds and dreams. The forest had marked them, its secrets etched into their memories like the carvings on those ancient trees. And the question that stayed with them long after the trip ended: when the forest reaches out, will it ever truly let you go? Lucas was not just any hiker. He was a tech enthusiast, someone who combined his love for the outdoors with the latest gadgets. Before setting out on this solo trek, he carefully packed his satellite phone, a high-definition camera, and a portable solar charger. His plan was to document a remote section of the Olympic National Forest, far from cell towers and crowds, capturing the raw beauty of the wilderness while staying connected through his satellite link. The forest he entered was thick and ancient, trees towering like silent guardians over a carpet of moss and fallen leaves. The air was crisp, filled with the subtle scent of damp wood and earth. Lucas moved steadily, each step crunching softly against the dry leaves, the only sound besides the distant, occasional call of a bird somewhere deep in the canopy. The silence here was profound, almost absolute, broken only by nature's gentle whispers. After several hours, he came upon an abandoned ranger station, a weathered structure nestled at the edge of a small clearing. Its wooden walls were cracked and faded, paint peeling from years of exposure. Broken windows reflected the dimming light, and an old, rusted sign swung loosely on its hinges. The place carried the weight of forgotten stories, as if it had been waiting for someone to return. Lucas decided this would be his campsite for the night, a base for his exploration. He pitched his tent nearby, carefully setting up his camera on a tripod to record the surroundings. His satellite phone sat beside him, a lifeline in the remote forest. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, he felt a strange stillness settle over the clearing, like the forest itself was holding its breath. What Lucas didn't know was that the silence was the calm before something unseen stirred, something that would soon break the quiet and pull him into a nightmare he could never have anticipated. As night descended, Lucas settled into his camp near the abandoned ranger station, confident in his equipment and prepared for the solitude. He turned on his satellite phone, expecting a steady signal to keep him connected. But instead, the screen flickered and then went dark, the signal lost without warning in the middle of the forest. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Moments later, the phone crackled back to life, but the transmission was distorted. Voices filtered through the static, faint, desperate cries for help, overlapped by muffled, urgent whispers. Lucas listened intently, heart racing, trying to make sense of the garbled words. The voices weren't local, and none sounded like anyone he knew. They spoke of being trapped, of something closing in, and a warning to run. But the message broke off, swallowed by static once again. He glanced over at his camera, now set to night vision mode, its green glow casting an eerie light on the tent and surrounding trees. In the lens, fleeting shapes appeared, figures moving just beyond the tree line, too quick and blurred to be clearly seen. They slipped between trunks, disappearing whenever Lucas turned his head in their direction. There was no sound with them, only movement, unnatural and deliberate. Then came the footsteps, slow and measured, crunching twigs beneath them, drawing closer with every breath. Lucas was alone, yet the forest seemed filled with unseen watchers moving just beyond the firelight. The footsteps circled his camp, stopping and starting, as if weighing him, studying him. Suddenly, from the shattered windows of the old ranger station, a faint, cold light glowed. It pulsed softly, a pale beacon in the darkness. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. Whatever was inside the station, it wasn't empty. The light seemed to be watching him back, waiting. Compelled by a mixture of fear and curiosity, Lucas approached the ranger station, each step weighted with growing unease. The faint light inside flickered, casting long, twisted shadows on the cracked wooden floorboards. As he pushed open the creaking door, a cold draft swept past him, carrying with it a faint, metallic scent, sharp, bitter, unmistakably like dried blood. Inside, the walls were covered in strange, cryptic messages scratched deep into the peeling paint. Symbols, words, frantic scrawls that spoke of desperation and warning. Some phrases were barely legible, others chillingly clear. They watch, no escape. Leave now or lose yourself. The air was thick and stale, heavy with the weight of secrets long buried. On a rickety table lay a worn journal, its pages stained dark with dried blood. Lucas's hands trembled as he opened it, revealing hurried, fragmented entries describing an unknown presence in the forest. Voices in the night, shadows moving just beyond the light, and the creeping feeling of being hunted. The last entry was abruptly cut off, as if the writer had been interrupted mid-thought. His satellite phone crackled again in his pocket, breaking the silence. This time, the distorted voices were closer, sharper, almost intelligible. Then unexpectedly, the whispers shifted. No longer distant cries, but words spoken directly to him. A voice, low and urgent, urged him to run. But the meaning twisted into a warning. It's already inside. Before Lucas could react, the heavy wooden door slammed shut behind him with a force that shook the entire building. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. An unseen presence seemed to close the distance, the temperature dropping as shadows gathered around him. The weight of the forest's secret settled like a trap, and the last thing Lucas saw was the faint glow of his phone fading to black as the darkness claimed him. The footage cuts off suddenly mid-scene, the last moments swallowed by static and silence. Days later, search teams arrive at the remote campsite, finding it eerily abandoned. The tent stands empty, gear scattered, and the old ranger station silent as ever. Lucas is nowhere to be found. His camera, however, still records, its lens staring blindly into the dark woods. The video feed flickers, capturing only static, and beneath it all, a faint, steady sound breathing. Slow, unbroken, watching. The question lingers long after the rescue teams leave the forest behind. What was the last message Lucas received? And who, or what, was trying to reach him in the dark? If you found yourself alone in the woods, hearing whispers in the dark and feeling unseen eyes on you, what would you do? Would you stand your ground, or try to run? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Have you ever felt watched, even when you were certain you were alone? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true horror stories, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the unknown. Because in the woods, you're never truly alone.